blazing sword was placed at the gates of Eden. Also the cherubs were stood upon or knelt upon the Ark of the Covenant. Between the wings of the cherubs came the Shekinah's glory, the presence of the Lord. The word cherub from cherub means an ox or a bull. And we know that in ancient Jewish symbolism, the cherubim were represented with 4 heads: a lion, a bull, a man, and an eagle. These are the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac: Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And they are also placed on the corners of early Christian graves or sarcophagi. And the old nursery rhyme, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, bless the couch that I lie on. And here are the 4 animals. And of course you know that those 4 animals, the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac, were also associated with the evangelists. And at the present time I'm working an article for Horizon which is going to deal with the lion of St. Mark. There is one of your 4 signs. Each of the apostles had one of the 4 evangelists had these 4 creatures, the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac, assigned to them. Thus these symbols go on, and we find them not only in ancient times, but in more recent religious history. Now, after a length of time, 2160 years to be exact, the precession of the equinoxes retired till it reached the last degree of the sign of Aries. And we find the beginning of a new religion, a new concept of religion. And it is interesting that it should have arisen about 17 or 1800 years before the beginning of the Christian era. For it was at that time, according to the old tradition, that the great mysteries of the Greeks at Eleusis were brought into existence. Perhaps this date is traditional. Perhaps it is astronomical. But the fact is that it served a symbolic purpose. For at that time it is said that at the time of the vernal equinox, always the time of greatest importance in ancient festival, the Hierophant of the rites of Eleusis came forth upon the porch of the temple, carrying in one hand the shepherd's crook, and in his other, in the hollow of his left arm, a newborn lamb. And he held up the shepherd's crook and elevated the lamb to the admiration of the people. And 1800 years before the beginning of the Christian era, he cried out in a very loud voice, "All hail, Lamb of God, that taketh away the sin of the world." Now this lamb is very interesting. This is the Paschal lamb. This is also the lamb associated with the rites of Jupiter Ammon, the ram-headed god of the ancient Egyptian, Latin, Greek peoples. Also this was the ram's horns upon the forehead of the crown of the north and south of the ancient Egyptians. This was the scapegoat of Israel. And here also we have the offering of the lamb as an offering to the Lord in the sacrifice of Isaac. We have also many references to the blood of the lamb, purification by the lamb, the heart of the lamb, the Angus Day. And we find the rites and rituals of the lamb and the symbolism of it, Jason and the golden fleece. For the golden fleece was the symbol of the curtain of the mysteries. And this was the wool that was pulled over the eyes of the unworthy. The symbol of secrecy, the symbol of ritualism. The search for the golden fleece was man's search for truth. Here is the lambskin apron of the ancient Masonic guilds of operative masonry in the Middle Ages. Here are many, many symbols dealing with the mystery of the Lamb. And then there came a time when again the equinox continued in its precessional motion, and the sun at the great moment of the equinox moved from the first degree of the sign of the Lamb to the last degree of the sign of the fishes. And when it occurred, when this happened, it entered into the sign which is ruled over by two small fishes. And here we come also to one of the most important points in the entire system of astronomical religion. And that is that the sign of the fishes is the last sign of the zodiac. The sign of the ram is the first. Now someone will say, why? How are you going to divide a circle into first and last? By what strange figuring did men come to the conclusion that Aries was the first sign? The answer goes back to the Vedic researches of India, where it is said that at the beginning of another great age that lasts much longer than the Photonic year, that at the beginning of a very great cycle of 4,320,000 years, that the original first point of a great cycle of time is established by the conjunction of the 5 planets and the 2 luminaries in one sign. This can only occur once in a vast cycle of mathematical calculation. And the last time that the 7 met together was in the sign of Aries, by which another great cycle of calculation was established. They will then separate as now and move at various orbits and times through all the different parts of the heavens, forming innumerable combinations of themselves. And they will ultimately meet again. And in the next time that they will meet in the same element, one sign removed. In other words, Aries is the element of fire. But they will not meet in Leo, which is the next fire sign, but in Sagittarius. So the next great cycle will begin with the conjunction of the 5 planets and the 2 luminaries in Sagittarius, and that will measure another great cycle of world development. Within this cycle come the great yugas, the 4 ages which were known as the gold, silver, iron, and bronze ages of the ancients. All these things were mathematical, astronomical phenomena. But for our present moment, we say that the sign of Aries is the beginning, and the sign of the fishes is the end of the zodiac. Thus these two come together to form an interesting symbolism. And the sun god, or in this case, John on Patmos, describing the mysteries that were celebrated there, the Phrygian rites, causes the great being of the Phrygian mysteries to say, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Now this also has very great interest, because of two symbols particularly associated with Christianity. One is the fish. The first symbol of the Christians was a fish. And in Rome they recognized each other by drawing the shape of the fish upon the sand. The name for fish was an acrostic on the name for Christ. St. Augustine says that Christ was a fish broiled for the sins of man. It's a very interesting symbolism. So we find Christ standing, calling the apostle, and saying, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. The miracle of the fishes, the drought of the fishes. The miracle of the coin in the fish's mouth. Many other miracles that relate to the story. And Jesus, in speaking, going forth upon a ship on the Sea of Galilee, the water symbol of the fish is very interesting. One of the ancient deities came forth out of the sea as Dagon, or the fish man. And the bishop's mitre of the Christian church is a fish's head on end. These things are important, for here we find a transition taking place. And at this transition of sign, the rising of a faith which had as its principal symbols the two principles, or two ideas, the Lamb of God and the Fisher of Men. The fisherman's ring is the ring of the Pope. The symbol of the papacy was the great fisherman, named from Peter, who was referred to not very long ago in a book called The Big Fisherman. He was the fisher of men, and this was the symbolism. Now, if you look in your zodiac, you will find that directly across from the sign of the fishes is its opposite. Each sign has its opposite. There being 12 signs. And the opposite sign to the fishes is the sign of Virgo, the Virgin. And the Assumption of the Virgin, the feast of the Assumption of the Virgin, takes place when the sun, the symbol of the principle of life, is in the sign of the Virgin. It's a very interesting parallel again. Now, the Virgin in ancient times was Ceres or Cori, the mother who was always still a virgin, because she brought forth immaculately the food, the earth, the grain, the flowers, the trees. Everything was born from her, but she was still the mother of mysteries, the eternal Virgin. She was Isis, the mysterious being whose veil no man could lift. And this symbol in ancient astronomy carried in its arms either a sheath of grain, as Cori did, or sometimes the loaves of the Passover, or the unleavened bread. So we have an interesting thing. Jesus, the sun entering the symbol of the equinox and the sign of the fish, performed the miracle of feeding the multitude with 2 fishes and the barley loaves, and there were 12 baskets of scraps left. Again, the circle of the zodiac. Later, when the time came for the master to prepare for the Passover, he sent a disciple into the city, and he said to him, "You will see a man who carries a pitcher of water on his shoulder. Follow that man. When he enters into a house, go in likewise, and go to the upper room and say that your master wishes it to celebrate the Passover." Who is the man with the pitcher of water on his shoulder? He is the Egyptian deity Canopus, the water man. He is also Aquarius, the water bearer, always represented in the ancient system of the zodiac as a man carrying a pitcher of water on his shoulder. He carried that pitcher of water long before the beginning of the Christian era. So the sun, moving on, goes into the new age, of the age that is to come, to celebrate again its passing over in the sign of the water bearer. Of course, the sign or the ritual of the Passover is the passing over of the sun at the time of the equinox. All these rituals have been very carefully measured to meet the astronomical requirements, like the epoch and the golden year and all these things. We have calculations to run through every one of these symbols. Now, one of the great questions that has arisen perhaps in our studies a little has been to determine, if possible, the time of the beginning of the age of the fishes, or what we call the Piscean age. It is, of course, a nice, trite contrivance to say that it began with the beginning of the Christian era. But in India and in many other countries, a point is made with which some Western astronomers and astrologers will certainly be at variance, namely that at the present time the equinox is taking place approximately in the 8th degree of the sign of the fishes. It hasn't left. It hasn't moved into this other age yet. If the Indian and the old Chaldeo-Babylonian calculation is correct, by a very curious thing, a circumstance that is almost too remarkable to be a coincidence, the vernal equinox should have entered the sign of the fishes approximately the year 325 AD.